Episode 109 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this historic episode of the Interpretation Station. Hopefully, because it's my hope that this will be the last Interpretation Station before we hit the big 1K. I'm currently, when I last looked, I was on 995 subscribers. I'm hoping to hit the big one today. I've got to say, I've been greatly helped. I don't know if you saw me perform like a trained monkey at the TERP Summit on Wednesday. I did a bit statement. I did a presentation about marking up texts and things. I'm going to be putting that video, the recording of me, up on the Interpretation Station channel in due course, so you'll have free access to it. Met some really nice people during the presentation and after. I was hanging out in the coffee lounge, and just off the top of my head, I want to give a big shout out to some of the people that I met. I met, for example, Mr. Mike LeMay for the first time. Lovely guy. Big shout out to you, Mike. Really nice chatting with you. If there's any other people that I've forgotten, by the way, please don't take offense. I met Dihia from Algeria, who is from Algeria. I met Elsa Sarkis from Lebanon. There was Melissa, I remember, from Sao Paulo in Brazil. I spoke to one of the gods of interpreting. I spoke to Mr. Andy Gillies. I spoke to Nathalie from France. I spoke to Mena. So all these guys who have come to my Sunday at 6 workshop. So it was really nice chatting with all of you. And I hope to keep in touch. I hope to hear more from you. If any of you guys would like to, if you need advice on career choices, or if you want to collaborate with the Interpretation Station, I am but a direct message on LinkedIn away. Okay. Now, the episode that we are doing, and I also want to thank, by the way, I should thank the organizer of the event, Sophie Llewellyn-Smith. So I want to thank her for all her efforts in organizing the conference and all the facilities provided to us speakers. I think it was a really successful conference, and I want to thank her. Okay, so today's statement is going back to, if you were there at the Sunday at 6 workshop last Sunday, you will recall that we did a whole series of statements from the various general debates. We did Haiti, so that was the previous Interpretation Station episode. We did Turkmenistan, which will be the next Interpretation Station episode. And today's one, which was Cuba in 2018. Now, unfortunately, of course, I forgot to record. I stupidly forgot to record the workshop itself, which I'm still pissed off about. But okay, we're going to recap everything that we went through there for you guys who were there, and for those of you guys who missed it, and we'll just get straight down to it. So I'm going to share the screen with you now. Okay, so here we go. Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, presidente de los Consejos de Estado y de Ministros de la República de Cuba, en el debate general del 73º periodo de sesiones de la ACNU en Nueva York, 26 de septiembre de 2018. So all Cubans, I love a bit of Cuba. Always exciting, always very bombastic, always real passion in their statements. So again, it's some very good material in this one. Obviously, I'm leaving the link to this statement in the description box below, so you'll be able to go and practice it yourself. The full statement is about, I don't know, 12, 13 minutes long. You've got the audio there, you've got the transcript there. I suggest you go and practice it. Come and watch me, and I'm going to give you the commentary, on the first 2 pages at least. Okay, so with that, let's see what we had here. Okay, Madam President, Secretary General, it's impossible to be here speaking from this podium on behalf of Cuba y no evocar, and not evoke. I think we could get away here with just using the cognate in English. I think that's what works here. Or not recall, not hark back to. is another good alternative. Not hark back to the historic moments of the General Assembly that are also our fondest memories. This was actually my idea for más entrañable, our fondest. Back at the workshop, I remember, I think Monday suggested our most cherished memories. So that's a nice way of doing it. Fidel Castro, Ernesto Che Guevara, Raúl Castro Ruz, y el canciller de la dignidad, Raúl Roa. Well, these guys here, I'm sure you've all probably heard of, the two Castro brothers, Che Guevara. Shout out here to Sterling, Mr. Sterling Ellsworth. We, of course, I did a breakdown of Sterling's interpretation of a Che Guevara statement at the General Assembly from the 1960s. You can go and see that if you click on this button here, on this, what do they call them again? On this card here. That's really interesting vocabulary in that statement that Che Guevara uses. Really worth watching. Now, this is an important word. Okay, la canciller. Always remember this one when the Latin Americans are talking. Okay, canciller does not mean chancellor. It means foreign minister. The foreign minister of dignity, Raúl Roa. Cancillería, foreign ministry. That's always a false friend that you want to watch out for. Por solo citar los más trascendentes. I think here you could just say to name but a few. Maybe los más trascendentes, to name but a few of the greats. They brought here. Okay, that's not a bad idea, is it, to maybe make a full stop here? In fact, yeah, they brought here not just the voice of our people, but that of other peoples, other Latin American, Caribbean, African, Asian, non-aligned peoples. Okay, no alineados. That is, of course, a reference to the non-aligned movement, which, of course, was an organization that was created, I believe, in the 1960s. It was headed by then President of Yugoslavia, the then hard man of the region, Tito, and it was like a kind of third way between, you know, the West of NATO, and the East, the Warsaw Pact. So the non-aligned movement was something down the middle, and it had some, and it's still a force today, I guess you could say, and it included some big countries, you know, countries like India, Pakistan, I believe, Indonesia. A lot of the Latin American countries, they joined the non-aligned movement, and as I say, they're still at the UN. For example, today there's a group within the UN. They often go by the acronym NAM. Okay, that's an important one to know this, because in Spanish they don't say NAM. Well, they do occasionally, they do sometimes actually, but they often refer to themselves as MNOAL. Okay, MNOAL, Movimiento. The no is non, alineado, MNOAL, al for alineado. And I tell you, when I first added Spanish back in 2016 and I had my first meeting where that acronym got used, I didn't have a clue what it was about. MNOAL, I was like, shit, what's that? And I had to hurriedly ask my booth mate at the time, what does that mean? What does it mean? So yeah, MNOAL, just watch out. If you work at the UN, you are going to run into that, okay? With whom we shared more than half a century of struggled better than batalla, for a just international order, which we are still far from achieving. Alcanzarse, achieving or reaching. One of those is good. It is absurd, but coherente con la irracionalidad. Okay, coherent I don't like. Okay, with coherent I will usually go with consistent. Okay, consistent is generally a very versatile word. You know, you can say that it's consistent with various laws, consistent with UN resolutions, consistent with consistent with Agenda 2030. So coherent, I mean, we tend to refer in English, at least, when someone's speaking, is he coherent or incoherent? It means he's a bad speaker. So I think it's consistent with the irrationality of a world where the 0.7 richest of the population puede apropiarse del 46% de toda la riqueza. Now, the first thing that came to mind at the time was can own. Okay, apropiarse tends to be to own 46% of the wealth. But then it occurred to me, to be honest, in English, I think we talk about control. All right, we often talk about how the 1% richest of the population controls 50% of the wealth, whatever the figures happen to be. So I think either or would be good here. So word for literally it's own, but in English the word we often use in that context is to control. And if control comes to mind, use it. While the 70% poorest control only 2.7%. 3.46 million human beings. Remember, if you were doing this, if you were interpreting this, you could just probably round this up. You could say 3.5 million human beings, or even you get away with 3 million human beings. Remember, with those figures, try and keep things simple. So let's say we're going to say 3.5 million human beings live in poverty. Again, 821 million, you could probably round it down to 800 million suffer from hunger, 750 million are illiterate, and 840 million lack basic services of potable water. Potable water is a perfectly good solution here for that. You can call it potable water or drinking water, either or. Figures which, there's no doubt about it, are elaborated, are developed by, are put together, are drawn up by. So, okay, for elaborate, but not elaborated by. Okay, that's a big no. That's a horrible false friend. You'd hear it occasionally, and you know what? Probably even maybe once a year it'll sneak out. Just I'm caught off guard, and I go and elaborate something, but you want to try and avoid it. And that are administered or managed usually by organismos globales, global bodies, but which it seems have still not been able to sufficiently mobilize or move. Because this obviously refers to refers to the consciencia, right? What do we move someone's conscience, mobilize the conscience of the so-called international community? These realities, let's just get rid of Senora Presidente. There's a chance, if you notice, this guy talks quite fast. If you watch the original, maybe you can just drop that. These realities are not the fruit of socialism, as the US president claimed yesterday in this chamber. So remember, at the time it was Trump was still the president. In esta sala, okay, it's a very simple word, okay, deceptively simple. You might think, oh geez, what do I call this place? Is it a room, a hall, a chamber? I tend to go with chamber. Chamber tends to be my sort of go-to solution. Although if you ever go to the UN in New York, it is called the General Assembly Hall. So I think you can get away with either. To call it a room, I think, would be doing it slight injustice. It's quite a grand venue, okay? It's a chamber or a hall. They're a consequence of capitalism, especially of imperialism and neoliberalism. Del egoísmo. Okay, so the word that came up during the workshop was selfishness, which is very good. I also thought self-interest as well as a good synonym for selfishness. And the exclusion que acompaña a ese sistema. Now, acompaña, generally you want to try and avoid saying accompanies. Something that goes hand in hand with this system. There was another great solution proposed, and I can't remember who it was, but that suggestion was that undergirds. What a great word. Undergirds. I find it hard to say that word without making a stupid face. I'm sorry, I'll try. Of the self-interest and the exclusion which undergirds this system. Sorry, I can't do it. Just as well they don't see a face when you're interpreting. And of an economic, political, social and cultural paradigm which prioritizes, that's again my go-to solution for privilegia generally, to prioritize the accumulation of wealth in the pocas manos, okay, literally in small, in a small number of hands. But okay, think in English, we always talk about in the hands of a few, right? That's the sort of stock expression that we use in English. At the cost of the exploitation and the miseria, the misery, the impoverishment perhaps of the vast majority. That's our collocation, isn't it, for the majority of the vast majority. Capitalism bolstered colonialism. Capitalism fortified colonialism, maybe. Con él nació el fascismo, el terrorismo y el apartheid. Now, literally, it's maybe, with it was born fascism, terrorism, and apartheid. Another good word here with very much negative connotations, like related to being born. You could say maybe it spawned fascism, terrorism, and apartheid. Se extendieron las guerras y conflictos. Okay, here's again, if you're in the booth interpreting and you're nervous and you want to get that se extendieron out the way immediately, you could turn that into there was an extension or there was a spread of wars and conflict. If you're giving the speaker a bit more room, then you can just hold it in your memory a few seconds and say wars and conflict spread. But obviously this is the constant dilemma that we're in as interpreters, right? How relaxed are we feeling? Can we keep those verbs, hold them back till the end, till after the noun comes, or do we want to get them out of the way immediately, in which case we have to tweak the sentence a little bit? Again, it's a decision you take in the moment. Quebrantamientos de la soberanía, the destruction of sovereignty and the free determination of peoples, repression of the workers, minorities, refugees, and migrants. Es opuesto a la solidaridad. So you could say this, the simple solution, I guess, here, it's the opposite of solidarity and democratic participation. Another idea I had, though, for opuesto, a very strong, quite a strong word, was the antithesis. It's the antithesis of solidarity and democratic participation. Just gives you the antithesis has a bit more oomph than just plain old opposite. Los patrones de producción y consumo. So this is like a package. See, if you watch my talk at the TERP Summit, I was talking a lot about packages of words. This comes as a package, okay? Production and consumption patterns, okay? This is something they talk about a lot at the UN. They often use it with sustainable, so they often talk about sustainable production and consumption patterns. For some reason, in my early days, having added Spanish, I struggled a bit with patrones. I don't know why. But anyway, that's patterns, right? Easy enough to remember, isn't it? The PA, very similar letters, okay? Patrones, patterns, okay? So it's not hard to remember. So the production and consumption patterns that characterize them, that typify them, if you don't always want to be just saying characterize, that typify them. What do they promote? El saqueo, that's an important word, especially I don't think a statement by Cuba or Venezuela is an official statement unless it contains the word saqueo. So that is a word you're going to want to know. And you have all the 3 P's, okay? Plunder, pilfer, and pillage. And there's the other 4th one, which is maybe the best of all, to loot, okay? And just think all those P words I gave you, pilfer, plunder, pillage, they all contain the letter L, which takes you nicely to loot. These are the little devices I use to remember these sets of, as my colleague Dan Harrison calls them, semantic fields. Militarism, they threaten peace, they generate human rights violations, y constituyen el mayor peligro, okay, constituyen peligro, they pose the greatest threat, they pose the greatest danger. You could just say they are the greatest danger. Okay. To the equilibrio ecológico, I think environmental balance is slightly better than ecological in English. You can also the environmental equilibrium for equilibrio, but I think balance is easier to balance. 2 syllables, equilibrium, 5 syllables. Go with balance, it's easier to say. Okay, interesting expression here. Que nadie nos engañe aduciendo. Okay, so a few options that were proposed here. I think the nicest to me, okay, engañe, deceive, dupe. Let no one be duped into thinking. Okay, let no one be deceived into thinking. Or what else do we say in English? Let's not be fooled into thinking. Maybe that's what we say most naturally in English. Let's not be fooled into thinking that humanity does not have sufficient material, financial, and technological resources to eradicate poverty. Classic collocation there. Hunger, preventable diseases, and other scourges. Flagello, standard solution for flagello is scourge. But you also can say an ill or a blight, if you want to just say something a bit different. What is absent, lo que no existe, what doesn't exist, what is absent, is the political will among the industrialized countries who have the moral duty, historic responsibility, and abundant resources to resolve the most pressing global problems. Resolver, to resolve, to settle. Apremiante, again, I usually go with pressing or most urgent problems. Again, I hear the apremiante, and that sort of takes me on to pressing, okay? The truth is at the same time that we note a lack of funds to meet the goals and targets of Agenda 2030. So this is a reference, of course, to the Sustainable Development Goals, los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, los ODS in Spanish. Remember, there are 17 goals, and within each goal, there's a whole series of metas, of targets, right? And to address the growing impact of climate change in 2017, se derrocharon on gastos militares 1.74 billones de dólares. Okay, that figure, of course, just first of all, billones, that's a classic false friend, right? When you hear billón in Spanish, that's trillion in English. Generally, that's a good figure. I pointed this out during the workshop. That is a good figure just to remember. It's a good ballpark figure to have an idea of, because again, lots of delegations will refer to that figure. They'll say, "All this money is being spent on armaments, on weapons, when it could be used to feed the hungry, feed the poor." Okay. And this is an interesting word. Se derrocharon. Now, I must admit, if I was to come across this word in the heat of the action, if I was to hear this, doing, I'd be like, "Ooh, I'm not quite certain what that means." And what I would just have done is I would have just said in 2017 there was military spending of whatever $1.74 trillion. So if you're not certain of the exact meaning of a word, again, it's one of these devices just to that's one way of getting around it. Don't commit to it. Just there was. Now, it means to waste, squander. That really means, there was $1.74 trillion wasted on military spending or squandered. The highest figure since the end of the Cold War. Climate change is another realidad ineludible. We had a very good suggestion here. I think it was Monday. Said it was a stark reality. That's a really good word. Okay, a stark contrast, for example. I mean, literally, I think the word the closest to it is maybe an inescapable reality. Okay, but if you're in the booth and you just hear, and stark comes to mind, just say it, because it fits perfectly in English, a stark reality. And a question of survival for the human species, in particular for the SIDS, okay, pequeños estados insulares en desarrollo, small island developing states, right? Small island developing states. And everyone should know at the UN what these guys are. They're the SIDS. Funnily enough, you don't tend to hear the acronym used much in Spanish. Los países. I can't recall ever hearing that, but you can certainly use the English acronym. Some of those effects are already irreversible. Scientific evidence shows that increase of 1.1 Celsius compared to pre-industrial times, and that 9 out of 10 people are breathing contaminated or polluted air. However, the US, one of the main polluters, contaminantes de ayer, polluters, okay, of ayer y de hoy, of yesteryear and of today, Okay, you could say yesterday, I guess, for ayer. Just yesteryear sounds nicer. Okay. It's funny, there was something that came up in the Haiti one when I was saying a certain phrase that Shakespeare wouldn't have been very happy with. I think old William Shakespeare would have been happy with my use of yesteryear here. So again, you can say either, yesterday if you just want to play safe, yesteryear if you want to take your language that level higher. They refuse to support. Okay, here's acompañar again. So acompañar will usually be the best, my go-to for acompañar is usually support. Support the international community in cumplimiento, in complying with, in delivering on the Paris Climate Accords. There's a few ways you can call these, the Paris Climate Agreements, Paris Agreement on Climate Change, whatever you're most comfortable with. They thus jeopardize human life. They're jeopardizing the life. They are jeopardizing life itself of future generations and the survival of species, including the human species. So you can say compromise. Jeopardize, I think, is stronger. Furthermore, as if there weren't already enough threats to humanity and their finest creations, their most outstanding creations, for deslumbrantes. Okay, literally it talks about deslumbrante, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's about shining. It's all to do with light, okay? I think in this context, though, you can say, as I say, the most outstanding or finest. I like finest because it's easy to say. Is a fact which perpetuates and expands military and nuclear hegemonism, if you want, in detriment to the majority aspirations of the people for general and complete disarmament. That is something of a package. Okay, they're always talking about general and complete disarmament. Just remember that. It's easy in Spanish because the words are basically all just cognates, but there are other languages where it might not be quite so obvious. So just save that to the hard drive. An ideal which Cuba shares. Maybe I'd put a full stop here. As proof of its commitment to this goal, on the 31st of January, we became se convirtió. Okay, it's we're talking about we, Cuba, as the fifth state to ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Now, that is a relatively new treaty, which you may or may not have heard about. It's often known as just the Ban Treaty. Now, this treaty, I believe it was adopted within the General Assembly. A lot of states signed up to it, but crucially, none of the P5, none of the nuclear powers, have signed up to this treaty or are ever likely to anywhere in the near future. The US and the Russians don't agree on much, but they can at least agree that they don't want to have anything to do with the Ban Treaty. So that treaty sounds nice, but it's pretty much dead in the water because it hasn't got any support from the P5. But you will hear it mentioned. You'll often hear countries, the NAM countries, the non-aligned countries, shall we say, of what might be considered the non-aligned countries of this day and age. They will refer to the Ban Treaty. In this institution was born, okay, if you wanted it word by word, you can maybe say this institution saw the birth of the human will to overcome the destruction left behind by a terrible war, an appalling war, through dialogue among nations. So this, I guess, literally it is not possible to silence the danger. Maybe what would we say in English? It's not possible maybe just to ignore the danger, to hide, to hush up the danger, que se cierne sobre todos, which hangs above us all. Do dangers and threats, they hang above us all, or that haunt us all, for example? With the exacerbation of local conflicts, wars of aggression disfrazadas de intervenciones humanitarias, disguised as humanitarian interventions, or another good word I think for disguise, another good synonym, masquerading as humanitarian interventions, derrocamiento por la fuerza So the toppling by force of sovereign governments, the overthrow by force of sovereign governments, or for you Americans, I know you like to use the ouster by force of sovereign governments, so-called soft coups. So obviously he's having a real go here, I guess, at the West, at the US, who are perhaps most known for these kinds of interventions that, you know, everything's under the banner of humanitarian intervention, soft coups, and the intervention in the internal affairs of other states, recurring forms of action by certain powers. Again, we all know who the Cubans are talking about when they refer to certain powers. Con las más diversos pretextos. So you can just keep it as like in the original, or on various pretexts. If you don't always want to be saying pretext, you could perhaps say under various guises. So a guise is a good synonym very often for a pretext. And that is as far as we got on Sunday. So there you go. There's the first couple of pages. Some very, it's very rich vocabulary. You always learn new words. I say this all the time. I'm so boring, but yeah, you always learn new words from the Cubans. You're always going to come across something that you're like, oh, what is that? What is that? So there you go. Maybe try doing the whole text. See what other stuff the guy comes up with. Anyway, on that. So if you've enjoyed that episode, if you've learned a few new words, if you've learned a few new tricks, please do smash the like button. Please share with your amigos and amigas, and please subscribe. Get me up to 1,000, and that's pretty much it for today. Keep following me on LinkedIn for any new announcements. Maybe they're going to be doing some more Sunday at 6 workshops. Everyone who's watching this is free to come along, free of charge. You pay nothing. The only price is to subscribe. That's it. Don't ask for much. Okay, guys, with that, all that remains to be said is that episode 109 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.
The train is now leaving the Interpretation Station. We hope you enjoyed your visit. Until next time, folks.